Hey everybody, it's Gordon Majak here, back with another episode of Timeless Pop, Rock, and Soul. And today we are once again returning to the early 1980s for another little slice of musical heaven that sort of came out of that Laurel Canyon musical universe of the 60s and 70s, except we're going to be up in the 80s for this one, just like we were for Linda Ronstadt and Glenn Frey. More on that in 1 second. Before we get to that, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment below. I love reading your comments. You guys always keep me on my toes. You have great insights, some really great feedback there, and I love talking to you guys in the comments. So that's great. Thank you so much for participating in that way. I appreciate it. Now, today we have another artist who sort of came out of that broader Laurel Canyon musical universe there in the early 80s. And I will explain all the various connections here in a second. This is who I'm talking about. It is the late, great Nicolette Larson, another little singing angel who passed sadly before her time, but we are going to pay tribute to one of her best songs today. Now, Nicolette Larson famously got her start and her big break there after she appeared on the Emmylou Harris album in the mid-70s called Luxury Liner. That was sort of a classic album in its own right for Emmylou Harris back there in the 70s. Well, Nicolette Larson met Emmylou Harris and was on that album, and Emmylou Harris recommended Nicolette Larson to Linda Ronstadt. Nicolette Larson became friends with Linda Ronstadt and was actually at Linda Ronstadt's house when Neil Young called Linda Ronstadt and told her that he was getting ready to go on tour, and did Linda Ronstadt have any female background vocalists that she could recommend that would be good backing up Neil Young on his tour. And as it turned out, Linda Ronstadt said, well, as a matter of fact, I do have someone. I'm sitting right here with her right now. It's Nicolette Larson. One thing leads to another. Nicolette Larson gets connected to Neil Young, and the next thing you know, she is signed to Warner Brothers Records, and she is making her first album in her own right as a solo artist, after having appeared on countless records by other people as a part of that music scene. And when I say that music scene, we're talking about sort of the cast of characters that shows up repeatedly are people like Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt, Neil Young, the musicians that are connected to them, such as Andrew Gold. There's another name we'll be talking about today that's connected to a lot of those artists. So the same names seem to keep showing up over and over and over. And all these musicians are intermingled, sometimes personally, sometimes professionally. They're appearing on each other's albums, etc. So when Nicolette Larson got signed to her own record deal and recorded her own album, her first big hit, her big breakthrough hit, of course, was the classic cover of the Neil Young song Lot of Love. And Nicolette Larson took that one all the way to the top 10 in 1978, and it was a #1 hit on the adult contemporary chart. And it is just a classic. And if you do have any awareness of Nicolette Larson's name, that is almost certainly where you have heard her name and her voice. And that lady had just what you would call just a honey voice, just a singing angel, that girl. Her voice was just smooth and honey. And she had a huge hit there with the Neil Young song, A Lot of Love, in 1978. And despite continued efforts from her and the record company, she's covering a variety of songs by a lot of those same artists that are part of that scene. Despite everyone's efforts, after A Lot of Love and that huge success of that song, she never really recaptured that same level of glory again. They released singles. She had a few minor songs that got played on the radio, but certainly nothing that really was any great success. The closest she ever came to duplicating the success of A Lot of Love, and it wasn't close, was a duet that she did with Michael McDonald of the Doobie Brothers back in 1980. And that was a song called Let Me Go, Love, which you may have heard, which got a decent amount of airplay, but it didn't really do particularly well on the charts. Now, this song today from 1982, by this point, Nicolette Larson's career really wasn't going much of anywhere, but she was still producing albums, and this particular album was produced by the great Andrew Gold, who for many years was very closely connected to Linda Ronstadt because he was in her band for quite a long time. And again, you have all this intermingling going on. So Andrew Gold's been around. He was a hit artist and a successful artist in his own right as a singer and a lead guitarist, had a big hit with Thank You for Being a Friend back there in the 70s. You may remember that one. Andrew Gold was a major name in that circle, and he is the producer of this particular album. But this is an album that didn't go anywhere. There were no hits on this album. And if you didn't already know Nicolette Larson, you sure weren't going to hear about her as a result of this album, which is a tragedy because there happens to be at least one, if not more, tasty little nuggets on this album that you're going to be glad that you did find out about today. From 1982, the summer of 82, actually, right there around the same time as that Glenn Frey record, this is Nicolette Larson doing a song called Just Say I Love You. Pause it for a second. Thank God that she's on so many of those other records because she will live on through all of those contributions she made to all of those other artists. And of course, her own huge hit song. And maybe even this one, if you guys remember this one. What does your heart say? What a voice. Just pure honey. Man, I love her voice. I actually had to think about this before I picked this song today, because she, even though did not have, as I said, a super successful career in her own right as a solo artist, there were some lost gems there, no doubt about it, in her catalog. This is absolutely one, and there's a couple other ones, and one in particular that I probably will bring back around later. But her voice is just so soothing and comforting and reassuring, and you put that voice behind some of these other artists that I had mentioned on those records that she was contributing to as a background singer, and man, that is just butter coming from those backup vocals. And in her case, when you put her on the lead vocals, what a treat to hear her really carry a whole song. Nicolette Larson tragically passed due to various health issues far before her time, but was such a sort of under the radar figure from the in the popular sense, under the radar artist in terms of the public's recognition of her, other than the big hit that she had with the Neil Young song "Lot of Love." But boy, trust me, in that musical community, they all knew who she was. That Southern California pop rock sound there from the 70s and early 80s, they all knew who she was. And she was absolutely loved in that community. Musically speaking, for this song, it's kind of funny. And when I think back to, if you take this song, the Linda Ronstadt song, Easy for You to Say, and the Glenn Frey song, The One You Love, these last three videos that we've done here, it's funny, it occurred to me that this is 1982, moving into 1983 with the Linda Ronstadt song carried over into 1983. This is 1982. And in hindsight, 40 years later, you can appreciate how organic these recordings are. You're hearing real drums, real percussion, real guitars, human beings playing guitars, real vocals. There's no auto-tune. There's no clever tricks. This is just straight up great musicians playing real instruments. There's no synthesizers, probably. The most prominent keyboard is that beautiful Fender Rhodes electric piano, which of course was more of a 70s carryover sound. But it occurs to me that how organic these three songs all sound. And yet, 40 years later, none of these artists, and I certainly didn't, have any idea of how the music world was about to explode within about the next 12 months, actually, in 1983. And all of a sudden, you have this enormous influx of electronics and digital technology that almost overnight takes over the recording studio scene and the record business scene. And I'm talking about drum machines and synthesizers and tracking and all of these other various digital studio tricks and digital instruments, digital drums. You start getting into all this stuff, and I'm not saying, certainly there was some fantastic music made in the 80s, and we will be hearing a lot of it here on this channel. So don't get me wrong, I'm just saying the whole scene was about to shift, and between Glenn Frey and Linda Ronstadt and today Nicolette Larson, and that sort of vibe from the Southern California pop scene there, boy, nobody saw it coming, and it hit like a bomb. And the next thing you know, you're getting all these synthesized sounds, and the record companies are deciding that, you know what, we don't need to be paying all of these musicians to play these organic, real instruments on these Linda Ronstadt and Nicolette Larson albums, etc., etc. Why should we be paying for all this stuff when we can just hire a couple people that know how to program these synthesizers and drum machines and computers and all of this stuff? And it changes the whole sound of these records almost overnight. And that is just kind of weird to look back on it now and think of how it really seemed like it came out of nowhere. And we can really see it clearly 40 years later. As many great songs as there are in the 80s, and as much as I love some of that technology and some of it was used very wisely, and I love some of those other artists that came on the scene in the 80s, All of that is true, but in my heart of hearts, give me this organic, soulful, spontaneous, emotional connection. Give me this music from these legacy artists that grew up, in my humble opinion, doing it the right way, doing it the old school way. Because there's a soul and a feeling and a vibe and a spirit to this organic music. Everything from the sound of the instruments to just the feel that they play with. You can't replicate that with a synthesizer or a computer or a drum machine. Not to say you can't do great music with those things, but you're not going to get this feel. That's for dang sure. It is Nicolette Larson from 1982. A song I'm sure you never heard, but I hope you like it because, again, one of those artists that voice, she was always going to be under the radar, but she was also always going to be so well respected and loved in that community there in the Southern California pop scene. Just Say I Love You, Nicolette Larson. Next video, we are going to once again take a little turn here, a little off ramp, and head in a different direction. See you in the next video. Okay, anytime.